Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Media Watch. Myself, Bob Lufgren, and Rob Raffelli. What we do in here is talk about the media events and so on, and watching and make our own comments about it. And sometimes, generally, as where some flaws were made, basically, some of it that didn't quite meet the standard of fair media, basically. Anyway, we're going to talk about different subjects tonight. There's always news, and we do this every 2 weeks. So we, in those 2 week period, I think Donald Trump was indicted at least twice, at least one anyway, in Georgia. It seemed like every week, and we'll talk about that. Maybe that's our first subject. What do you think?
Sure.
What do you want as the first subject?
Well,
Rob?
actually,
let you introduce it.
Let's speak a little bit about that. Now, we know that he's already been indicted in New York by the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, and that's first. I want to say about the various indictments. None of them will stand on appeal. I can imagine, in a bad jurisdiction with a bad jury, that he might be convicted of some of them. None will stand on appeal because they all have constitutional issues that should just fatally flaw them.
What you're saying, and it's in the Supreme Court at least.
Yes, the Supreme
that's
Court.
where appeals will finally end up.
Right, either at an appellate level or at the Supreme Court itself.
Right.
All of those prosecutions will fail.
Right.
And they'll fail mostly because there are strong constitutional protections. As we keep hearing, no one is above the law, and as some people I like to quote, like Tom Fitton, say, and no one is below the law. The president does not lose his First Amendment right to free speech when he's elected president. Right. And so if he's, they're going to have to show, in order to show the crime, they're going to have to show, first of all, that there is a crime, and that he participated in it. And anyway, none of that stuff is there.
Yeah.
Now, for this, the latest is, of course, in Georgia.
Right.
And what they have on him there is they say, well, he was, calling people in Georgia, including in government, and he was looking for evidence that the Georgia election had been cooked because. And
by the way, he was a Republican Secretary of State and the governor who ran for re-election.
Yeah. And
both were re-elected. Re-elected to their office and so on.
Yeah, in fact, it's kind of interesting that there are all these. There are so many jurisdictions where the Republican slate takes lots of stuff, but somehow not the presidency.
Yeah, in fact, I always like to say too that that what happened was in the election, was the election for one of the senators there for a full term. And I guess in Georgia, it's they take the top few vote getters, and that's what happened in early November. That was the three people, and the top candidate, the two Republican Democrats, as it turned out, were up against the guy that was the football player, Walker.
Herschel Walker.
Yeah, Herschel Walker was the candidate, which I thought was not quite what we were looking for, and so on. I'm sure he's a very nice guy. He was and so on, but he didn't really seem to fit. Anyway, the bottom line is that it was a runoff, and I think a lot of that, and this is when all this controversy about Georgia and would they do it right and so on and so forth. Again, Republicans, obviously they were trying to do, and they were doing it right. That's what they did their job. He, of course, Donald Trump was bad-mouthing them, and he called them up and said, find 11,000 votes and all that. Well, that isn't exactly saying that they're going to do it. Maybe there was 11, and they did recounts all the time. Mm-hmm. But I think the Georgia voters at that point, from the beginning of November to the election, which by the way was held, I think, either on the 5th of January or the 6th of January, right in there. And of course, that was at the same time with the so-called insurrection. I don't think it was an insurrection. Whenever I see that guy with the helmet with the fur on it and coming out of his head, I always say he was a Viking fan, and he was going to the football game, and he got on the wrong bus, and he ended up in front of the Capitol. if he's the leader of the insurrection, well, there was no insurrection. At any rate, the bottom line is the Democratic was elected, whereas in Georgia, just previously, both senators were Republicans. And it may very well go back to that. Of course, there's not going to be an election in. These guys were, the most recent one was a guy who was elected for 6 years. I forgot his name. He was a reverend or some black guy. He was a reverend guy or something like that and so on. And so that's, it didn't work out. I think, not only to say that Donald Trump didn't, it might have been something going on with the election in November and so on, but it affected the election in January 5th, and that's when we lost the Senate majority in the House, in the Senate. You don't need Kamala Harris's vote. Of course, you don't need Kamala Harris anyway, but we'll get into that, I guess. Anyway, there was a lot of things. I'll comment also, as I said earlier before the show started, there's a freedom of speech, and there's no buts. There's no except for. There's nothing. It's a freedom of speech, period, in the amendment to the Constitution, in the First Amendment, right? And that's the very First Amendment in the Constitution. It's not and I don't think it's even, well, I guess it does say, there's also not protest. It says freedom to assembly in the same amendment. I've forgotten.
To assemble to petition for redress of grievances. It's peacefully to assemble for a redress of grievances.
It does say peaceful?
I believe it does.
Well, the guys in Portland, I guess, didn't get it. They first thing they do is started burning cars.
Yeah, well, that's... See, people seem to confuse and conflate protest and riot with free speech. And of course, it's not one of the things that you and I were talking about earlier. We've seen lots of situations where, let's say, somebody at a university invites a speaker. A speaker comes, and turns out there's also a contingent who don't want the speaker there. They object to them in many ways, and they come in and they shout people down.
Right.
I would actually argue that there is no such thing as a right to shout down somebody who's engaged in free speech, especially to the people who actually bought the tickets and want to hear them. I don't think free speech cannot be a right to silence others. The whole point of free speech is, you may hear some things that you didn't want to. Well, what are you going to do? You're not going to learn anything from hearing people who are saying what you wanted them to say anyhow.
Yeah. Well, there again, as freedom of speech is a complex thing. There was one justice one time said that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, something like that, and so on. And you can't make do it. And the Alabaster riots, I think before our show started, there's the Alabaster riot, who professor on campus at UCSB. This is against the war, I think, whatever it was. And they had motivated the kids to do some damage, and in fact, they went out to Alabaster and burned down a bank, and the Bank of America. And that was the new bank that they had built. The Bank of America had built. I forgot the guy's name who was the president of the bank at the time. But anyway, the bottom line is it was now the structure that's there now that he rebuilt looks like a fort. It's slits for windows and things like that. So he was pretty pissed off about it. But let me say this too. It's also there's a freedom to listen. There's a freedom of speech, but there's also your freedom to listen. You do not have to listen to people that you don't agree with, or you just don't care about what they have to say and so on. You can turn it off on the TV set. And don't tell me that, well, your children are going to be listening to and so on and so forth. Well, let them listen. Then you can explain it to them later. And what makes you the judge, even with your own children, for the rest of society, that this is not what's supposed to be said? For all other people in the country, what this person is saying, what Donald Trump is saying, what Joe Biden is saying, and so on, isn't. You can disagree with it, but you can't speak for the entire populace. The entire people of a country. You have a freedom of your opinion, and you have the right to vote. That's what it amounts to.
All right.
I said my speech.
All right. Well, since we're talking about him getting booked. I believe he's actually got booked tonight, and I have not been able to stay abreast of this. So I don't know what, they're going to do, I think there'll be a mug shot coming out of it today.
Right.
Now, if you see here on the screen, this is actually a faked up mug shot.
But I think this was pasted over
totally.
This actually that is what happened. Although tonight there would be one. Sorry.
This is a T-shirt that
really?
there's a guy I enjoy on YouTube named Mark Dice.
Yeah.
He said, I was expecting a mug shot from New York. Now I have to sell my T-shirts with a made-up mug shot.
And it's for sale too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He says I'll have to wait now until we get a real one. But of course, after tonight, there will be a real mug shot, and that will appear on people's T-shirts. Yeah. Because as we were noting earlier, every indictment, Trump's numbers go up.
Yeah.
So I can't predict the future, and I can't read people's minds, but I watch the weirdest things happening, and I have to wonder, what do these people think they're doing?
Well, like I said, before the show started, I said that I think the Democrats, and they're all Democrats that are doing this, made a big mistake. Donald Trump can't appear all at two different places at the same time. Mm-hmm. There's going to be all kinds of conflicts between scheduling and so on. And in fact, quite honestly, the Republican lawyers, lawyers will see to it. And this could last over time, before the election. This may be the most important historical. Nothing has ever happened like this in our elections and so on, where both candidates. And Joe Biden's got some bad stuff coming too, or all the candidates were in jail, and one may be elected, maybe already been elected if it goes past the election. And now what do you do? I mean, I guess all the Secret Service has to be in the prison where your president is. And don't tell me that this never happened. Eugene V. Debs won 6% of the vote, and he was in jail in 1920. In jail, and he'd run on elections, many elections. He got first because he didn't agree with the war and World War I and so on and so forth. Eugene, you look it up. Eugene, I'm sure many of you know it. He was a socialist. Progressive, whatever they want to call it, and so on, and they didn't like it, and so on. And Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, put him in jail. He didn't last very long, but he didn't stay there that long. But pretty much after the war, he got out. But he was in jail during the election. He got 6% of the vote. Now, of course, that doesn't give you a presidency, but.
Well, let us note a phrase that we've heard many, many times lately. That phrase is election interference. Well, trying to put your biggest opponent in jail in the year and a half or so before the election, that smacks of election interference. And remember, the first thing I think that they tried to indict Trump for was, he was catching a lot of, maybe it was the second. They managed to get all that stuff confused for me, but he was inquiring about a bunch of corruption in Ukraine. And Joe Biden, from his vice presidential days, was in it up to his hips. Right. And what the howls from the Democrats were that Trump was trying to interfere because he might be investigating or prosecuting his likely biggest opponent. So he was interfering in the election, and he was doing something horribly corrupt. Now that Biden is doing it, apparently it's swell.
Yeah.
I'm not impressed. I mean, it's.
Well, like I say, that and all the money that changed hands under. Like I say, I feel sorry for Joe Biden. He lost his wife and daughter in a car accident. He wasn't in the car at the time, and both of his sons, Bo and Hunter, were in the car too. They were also injured, but they didn't get killed. I don't think they were injured, but injured and so on. Anyway, and then of course he had his son, Bo, died of some disease and so on. And he was left with one son, Hunter, who was
he's a crackhead.
I mean, it just is, he doesn't. Leaving a laptop with 10,000 entries in a repair shop. Where did he get? He's too dumb to be a criminal. That's what it amounts to. thought he, of course, he was his own.
Here's another lovely bit of election interference, and that's that laptop. You know, that started to break as news in October of 2020, and in fact, the New York Post was running an article about it, and suddenly Twitter dropped the New York Post, and everybody was interfering with getting this story out there.
Yeah.
And then there was an orchestrated 50 or 51 former intelligence heads who all said, this smacks of Russian interference.
Interference, right, yeah.
Any one of them who knew anything about it had to know that that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Because they all knew that the laptop was real. Certainly Hunter and his father knew that the laptop was real.
Yeah.
And like in the last year, the New York Times has admitted that it was real. Well, yes, they suppressed a bombshell negative story, and because they wanted Biden to be elected.
Right.
Okay, you
sure
call it whatever you want. It's not really very honest behavior.
Certainly helped.
Well, a lot of Democrats said they might not have voted for Biden if they'd seen the story.
Well, that's going to come up again now because he's reelected. As I've said many times, it's going to be very interesting to see how it all ends up. It could very well be that Biden quits or dies, and I don't, believe me, I don't care. I don't care. I don't wish him he was dead, put it that way. In fact, it's quite honest, I would like to see him alive and running and so on and so forth. And if Kamala Harris survives the convention to be again nominated for the vice presidency, and I think that would be a big mistake for the Democrats to take her off. However, they have a Senate race here in California for a seat. It wasn't her seat that was taken by somebody else and so on. But Feinstein is not running anything again. I'm not sure she's even aware of anything. Anyway, so and I've seen it in the LA Times. They say, well, why not Newsom, who has already said he would, if Feinstein something were to happen to him before the election, he would automatically nominate a black woman to be the senator. And Katie Porter, of course, is a black woman. She's running for Kathy Porter is running for the Senate in Oakland. She was a representative, a congressional representative, and so she's already there. But what if Kamala Harris says, okay, I'll resign the presidency, but I want to get then make a deal with Newsom, and that's another. Like I say, it gets very complex very quickly, very quickly. It's a messy business. Democracy is a very messy business. That's what it amounts to. What's the quote from Churchill? The one that's
the terrible system, just better than all the others.
Better than the alternative. I think better than all the others. Right, which is true. And that's what he meant, of course, is that was Democrats. Excuse me, dictators. Maybe Democrats. Dictators. And whose method of secession in taking over is assassination. Just happened in what was it was it not Guatemala? I think it was down in Peru or something like that, where a guy was assassinated. He was a candidate, and they killed him.
There was a candidate, a popular candidate for president, assassinated in Ecuador.
Ecuador, that's what it was. Okay, I knew it was somewhere down there.
Yeah, I think he was killed in Quito or somewhere nearby.
Yeah, right. He was assassinated, and in fact, in our elections, nobody dies. Nobody, you don't hear of anybody being killed. Maybe some fist fights break out and so on. But bottom line is all working. Whereas in Mexico, candidates, I think at one time, the most recent election that they had down there, over 100, 150 people were killed for political reasons. They were running for office. Before the election happened, they were running for office, and the opposition was afraid that they were going to get elected, so they eliminated them. Assassination is a very, in many governments, is a tool of politics in those things. Whereas in this country, it's not. I think I said that too, and you said, what did you say? It's running out of office is kind of their assassination. Something like that you said earlier. But anyway, you want to change the subject? We pretty much beat that one to death. What's the next thing you think we should talk about? Let's move
Well,
on.
yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Actually,
Unless you had something else to say.
Bob, I think what I'd like to do now is a little bit of sort of, I don't know, it's somewhere between humor and beating up on politicians. You know, I wanted to address the fitness for office of Biden and Harris.
Okay.
So I've got a few video clips that I think
Okay.
are kind of fun, but
Okay.
also there'll be I'll end this with an interesting contrast that somebody did. There was a guy, let's see, maybe 3 years ago or so, Trump was doing some sort of address and he reached for some water and he grabbed the bottle of water with both hands and took a drink.
Yeah.
The MSNBC and CNN were all over that, saying he needed two hands to take a drink. Is he neurologically sound? You know, they just made so much stew out of this oyster, and of
Yeah.
course there was nothing wrong with him, at least not on any. And anyway, it's kind of amusing. So I'd like
Yeah.
to roll a few.
Yeah, I think it's overwrought with some of that stuff. It's
Yeah.
a little bad, but he seems to trip on the stairs going up into the plane
Oh,
pretty frequently.
yeah. In fact, let's start with that image then.
Gerald Ford did it once, and oh my God.
Yeah, well, they were making him into some sort of horrible klutz, and in fact, Chevy Chase actually suffered injuries because he pretended to, he was playing Jerry Ford, and he fell
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
probably 100 times on Saturday Night Live, and he actually wound up with some permanent injuries from doing that so often. Whereas Gerald Ford
Whatever happened to him?
Gerald Ford had been a college football player and was not clumsy,
Yeah.
but he did fall once, and they
Yeah.
caught it on camera, and we never saw the end of that. Let's see, how about my old friend?
I think it happens with Biden too. And some of that stuff is we can't find his wife off the stage, and his wife has to tell him what to do, and so on and so forth. Well, it happens,
There we go.
but it seems to be a lot more.
This is supposed to be Joe Biden.
Okay.
Stop giving me your toughest battles, and Jesus saying to him, "They're stairs, Joe.
Giving you your highest,
Your toughest battles.
Stair.
They're
Who's
stairs."
that supposed to be? Jesus.
Jesus.
Oh, Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, stop smacking this. Okay. So actually, I'm going to run a few videos here that I think that we'll all enjoy, or at least I will. And that's what's really important. Actually, the first one is Nancy Pelosi making, in my opinion, a very good point. So, and you can't really skip that sort of thing. So,
people think that the President of the United States, is this more on the subject and everyone knows, or you let me know? People think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness.
student
He
debt.
does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
Yeah, we had that one before too.
Did we? Anyway, I just feel like, first of all, Nancy Pelosi was saying something true, and she was speaking as reasonably and pleasantly as I've ever heard her speak. So I thought,
Yeah.
bears repeating.
What was she
'cause-
actually referring to? When was that?
She was
Actually, was this
she was-
Donald Trump or?
No, this is about Joe Biden and wanting to do the student loan debt forgiveness, because he was saying, Biden was saying, we're going to forgive student loan debt,
Yeah.
and
And she was saying that Joe Biden couldn't do it.
right, she was saying that doesn't happen to be a presidential power. That would have to be an act of Congress. And of course, she's right, because for one thing, it's
Yeah.
spending money that hasn't been allocated.
Yeah.
So
Well, the Supreme Court turned it down. Obviously, that always gets me. I think Joe Biden did that prior to the election, because now he had, when he said that, it was like several 100,000 people applied for it right off the bat, students and so on, and they all thought they were going to get it. The decision of the Supreme Court, of course, was that no, you can't do that.
And in all
Nancy
likelihood,
Pelosi has already said.
in all likelihood,
And of
Biden.
course, the election was over.
I again want to thank the Secretary for your work. This issue of transportation is fundamentally about just making sure that people have the ability to get where they need to go. It's that basic.
And that, my friends, is the Vice President.
What was that about?
Oh, that was.
Is that recent?
Yes, it is recent.
Yeah.
That was, Kamala Harris was addressing people on the some transportation bill and the Department of Transportation, and this is, she always delivers this stuff like she's talking to third graders.
Yeah.
This is about transportation, making sure that people can get where they need to go. It's just that basic.
Yeah, that's right.
Funny
that.
laugh.
Yeah.
And I mean, if it happened once, I'd
What
say,
is she talking about that for? What is? I don't know.
just
I
roll.
don't know. She gets involved with things. I don't know. I think that she's lost a lot of credibility. She ran for president against Biden and pulled out before the first primary.
Yeah, well, she was polling at less than 1%.
Yeah.
So that means less than 1% of Democrats wanted her. Now she's a heartbeat away from the
Right.
presidency.
And she lost the primary in her own state, in California. Well, of course, she wasn't even on the ballot at that point.
Okay,
But
here's
polls
one.
showed her that she was behind.
Now,
Freestanding, have 32 freestanding members standing together to defend our people and our territory.
so that's Joe Biden in his incoherency talking about NATO. And actually, I'll just mention about NATO. NATO is sort of an anti-Russia alliance, and there's a reason why Russia gets a little antsy when we want to recruit all these countries to an anti-Russia alliance that happen to be on their border.
Yeah.
So I don't think any Russian aggression is good, but if Russia was putting together an anti-America alliance and they wanted to get Canada and Mexico in on the deal,
Right.
you can imagine us thinking, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel a little hemmed in.
Well, I think that's not going to happen as far as Putin is concerned. Like anybody, I guess not even his people there. Well, the one guy that had tried a little revolt, the head of the Wagner group, or that he lost his life and was killed in a plane crash, and all of his people that were under him, his deputies and so on and so forth. What was it, 11 people or something like that? Were killed, including 2 pilots.
Yeah, 10 total, including 2 pilots. That guy is Prigozhin. His first name is, it's their version of Eugene. It's Yevgeny. Yeah. Yevgeny Prigozhin.
Yeah.
He was the Wagner Group co-founder.
Right.
And his co-founder was also in the plane and died with him. And
he wasn't a very, very good person. But let's face it. He had this troops that were pretty brutal and all that. But he tried to get more power and didn't work, and he ended up in Belarus or something like that. But
right.
that
kind of
plane went down here a couple of days ago or recently, and he lost his life. And now they're going to the Russians are going to investigate how that happened and so on. I'd like to know. Well, you'll never really will know, because as I said before, assassination is a method, is a tool in governments like that under dictatorships.
all right, I just want to cover a couple more here. One is,
It ain't going to go away. Go ahead.
here, Joe Biden. When you get to say, I think so and so should be investigated, that's kind of a threat, because this is one of those cases where you're not saying, oh my God, there's been a crime, let's see who did it.
Yeah.
This is saying, I never liked that guy. See if he ever did anything.
Yeah, right.
So here he is, I would say, threatening Elon Musk. And
Oh, really?
yeah.
Yeah.
The
richest man in the world. He probably is equivalent to the United States government. This man is the richest man in the world and so on. You mess around with Elon Musk, you're messing with the wrong guy. He has a lot of power.
Well, let's remember what somebody said that about the Pope, and they said it to Stalin, who said, "Really, how many divisions does he have?"
Yeah, right. And that was very true, of course. But in Elon Musk's case, he can have a maybe he'll take over the Wagner Group, have his own soldiers. I can tell you right now, he has a security around him that, well, the equivalent to the SS or something around Hitler, which ended up being thousands of guys.
We shall see.
Basically, wherever he went, they went.
Anyway, let's listen to Joe
It
Biden.
worked. He never did get him.
Let's listen to Joe Biden threatening Elon Musk.
Okay.
That Elon Musk's cooperation and/or technical relationships with other countries is worthy of being looked at. Whether or not he is doing anything inappropriate, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that worth being looked at. But that's all I'll say.
I've got my eye on you.
There's a lot of ways. All right.
There's a lot of ways.
Well, good luck, Joe.
Speaking of a lot of ways,
He probably does have some support in a lot of other countries and so on. He could afford it.
that even a lot of ways, that's reminiscent of Chuck Schumer when he heard Trump complaining in some way about the intelligence community, and Chuck Schumer said, "Gotta watch it. Those guys have 6 ways from Sunday of getting at you."
And they do.
And they do, and they did.
Yeah, right. He has Twitter, and he could do a lot of. He released a lot of that stuff. Supposedly was.
The
and
Twitter files.
That didn't help much, and he has control over that. He has that right that he can do it. Release all that stuff.
Now we've seen a little of Joe Biden. Let's contrast with what they were saying, that Donald Trump was, probably should be removed from office because of his neurological problems. It's most enlightening. I wish I had a better way to go about this.
And you tell me when this was shot then too.
This will be maybe 2 years into. This might be around
Trump's presidency.
around 2018 or 2019 in Trump's presidency.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
So let us open, and this is not the best way, but it's my way. I'm sorry, it's a small. Okay, that was Trump drank like that.
That is hard to watch.
All it took was a slight decline to make him look foolish.
25th Amendment in Section 4 says that the Vice President in the Cabinet or the Vice President in a body set up by Congress can determine that there's presidential incapacity for reasons physical or mental.
He drinks water or any glass with 2 hands.
But as Sanjay also says, there are a lot of questions around the president's physical fitness, him having trouble lifting a water glass to his mouth. He had to use his left hand to basically finish helping his right arm guide it to his mouth.
So I talked to a bunch of neurologists over the weekend. A lot of people talking about this.
CNN?
Is not known for being
Yes.
athletic, has a hard time going down a gently sloping ramp.
And now, Biden.
Yeah. There he goes.
Falling upstairs 3 times.
Fell down.
Oh.
And they play it up, Doesn't last
So
very
not-
long, but
Not
like
the.
I say, I don't think just to hear him speak and all that, do the stuff. He just doesn't. I'd like to see him if he is nominated and Trump is nominated, or anybody who's nominated Republican. I want to see if he's going to actually debate that Republican candidate and so on, because he'll get crucified. He just will get crucified. He'll forget stuff and so on. It'll look bad for him.
I really expected that in 2020, and I had never. Well, that was the best I have seen Biden in the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, years ago he was completely on top of it, completely with it. I never liked him, but I would not have said that he was incompetent in any way.
Yeah.
But
he won the election, of course.
He was, but he was terrible in 2020, just awful. And then when at the debate, I looked at him and I said, I think they've adjusted his medication because
Yeah.
because he seemed more with it than usual by quite a lot.
Yeah,
And he certainly knew enough to attack the Hunter Biden laptop with the
yeah, right.
with the false testimony
Right.
of those.
But then again, somebody else might have done that.
Oh, yeah,
Like I
I-
always hear
yeah.
that who is in control.
Right. It's after all, he's always got one of those in his ear, and you don't know who's whispering.
Right, exactly. Do what you're told. But if he doesn't have what do they call it? The speech right in front of him and all that.
Yeah, that would be the teleprompter.
Teleprompter in front of him. But you don't get that in debates. You have to think on your feet. And I think that's a pretty good deal to do. You want to have somebody that can adjust to the situations and things like that. I'm not sure Donald Trump really does that in him. But a lot of speakers can't do it. But Biden, he just, they ask him a question to Elon Musk, and it takes him 2 minutes to come up with something to say at least.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's for some reason. That reason, I think he is. This is a guy that can really be hurtful. He can make sure that Joe Biden doesn't get elected. Anyway,
any subjects that
got about 20 minutes here
are crying out for you? Because there's some things I don't have pictures for, but I'd like to mention.
Sure.
One was a recent New York Times op-ed. The person doing the op-ed is a guy named Adam Grant, and they quickly retitled his op-ed because its title originally was "Elections Bad for Democracy." That they've tried to spin that as a lot of.
Did you read it?
I read excerpts from it.
Yeah. Okay.
But
how do they get to that point? I mean, that's stupid.
Yeah, I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
What he was beginning with the idea that they were, in order to play to the various bases, that candidates would take more extreme positions, and then of course some of them would get elected, and they'd be expected to go with their positions. At any rate, he was proposing his solution to this possible non-problem because he wanted to get rid of the Electoral College, of course. Oh, he wanted the election to be completely at large. So he had a bunch of
wanted the election to be what?
Completely at large. In other words, instead of basically he was looking for a national majority vote rather than currently the presidency is elected by 50 elections, and it would in the states which select the electors of the Electoral College. Anyway, basically he had like 3 or 4 unconstitutional prescriptions.
Yeah.
And anyway, we all know what is wrong with democracy. After all, none of us think that it's perfect. What does it mean? It means sometimes a demagogue gets in. Sometimes, well, basically, as far as the New York Times is concerned, half the time the population votes wrong, and they're horrible, and then the rest of the time the enlightened ones prevail. I figure that we really only need one voter, and that would be me, and so I'll vote, and I'll vote correctly. The rest of you guys can stay home.
Right. Well, as I say, again, one of those things. It isn't this election; it's the next election. Even at 24, it's not. It's the next. It'll be the 26th election. They'll be talking about the candidate for presidency after the night of a president is elected in 2024. They'll be speculating, the media especially. Well, who's going to run in 28?
Sure.
Right off the bat, it's in one campaign after the other.
Suppose, after all, Donald Trump
and it will happen.
Donald Trump might win. He might not. But suppose he wins. Well, the first thing we'll be saying is, well, that's his second term. He can't run again, and of course he'll be too old anyway. So who will the Republicans win? Who run? Who will the Democrats run? Yeah,
exactly.
But that's because that's the horse race. They either need something bleeding, they need something that's a horrible emergency, or they need something that's a wild horse race.
Right.
Will it be this one? Will it be that one? And I had a friend. He's probably been dead about 15 years now. Who he had a sort of cynical and conspiratorial frame of mind, and I asked him what he what he thought of the upcoming election. This was when the guys running were Bill Clinton and Bob Dole. So what do you? And so I say, hey John, what do you think of that? And he says, it doesn't really matter. The same people hold both their leashes.
What was the last part?
The same people hold both their leashes. In other words, he regarded them as lapdogs.
Yeah.
And not only that, but that the same rich conspiratorial groups controlled both of them anyway. So he was saying, he didn't think that it mattered. He said,
Did
one
your
of
friend
those.
vote?
Did he vote?
Was he a voter?
I believe he voted.
Did vote. So that you got to make a decision. That like you say that the speech introducing the candidates is when I've written this whole Joe Schmo the least worst of all of them. I can't remember.
My version of that is, I give you the man of the hour, the people's choice, the lesser of two evils, Bob Lofgren.
Thank God, I never went for office. I did actually one time, but not anymore. But it's the next election, and again, as I said before the show started, the voters never make a mistake. The voters are never wrong, but they do get a chance to every 2 years to change their mind, and that's exactly what they do. The Obama presidency, he got elected in 2008 with not a big majority, but it was there. And then he lost both houses of Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives in the 2010 election. 2012 he ran again, and he was elected. Better than it was the first time in 2008. And in fact, another 2 years later, I think he actually got that's when they got the majority in the House. And Pelosi, they had lost it in 2010. Anyway, they change their mind all the time. But they, if they make, they're not made a mistake. Quite honestly, I'll tell you something, but I might have a little theory. I think that no one agree with it, but the collective intelligence of the electorate isn't reduced to each individual. It's the total vote of people, and the winner and the loser, and so on. Those are the people. It's a collective intelligence that's way beyond. I haven't really saw any kind of reference there from the founding fathers, but anybody that they've written about it and so on. But it's more than the intelligence of one person. It's the intelligence of all of those voters. It works. The system really works. Keep in mind, you have I'll get into the revolutions and things like that and so on. But the system, it does work. It's messy, makes mistakes, but it works. We have a society today in the United States that's probably the best, most free, not quite as good as it used to be, I think. And that's the election. That's what would be the election that'll come up in the election is, and that's really what it's about.
All right. Here's a couple of underreported stories that may be reported more heavily soon. One is, we now know that Joe Biden was using at least 3 fake email names from the while he was vice president.
Yeah, I know that.
And it was, in fact, communications about Ukraine. So.
About who?
Ukraine.
Oh, Ukraine. Yeah.
Yeah. So. And in fact, I think
before the war started. Yeah.
Yeah. Part of this stuff was. Maybe his son just wanted to show his value to the Ukrainians who were paying him $1 million a year.
Yeah.
But for nothing except access to his father. But he would copy intelligence to his father, or his father would copy stuff to him.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is fairly fresh, but I expect to see more of it in the coming weeks. And it's it's always interesting to see what's going on there. And then. Here's something I think this story is probably going to go away, but how about that chef, Obama's chef, drown off Obama's property in Martha's Vineyard?
Yeah.
Now, the guy could swim. He was relatively young. He's on a paddleboard with somebody else, and he drowned.
Yeah.
And apparently that 911 call is the only one that we don't have any records for.
Yeah.
So I have nothing to accuse anybody of. I haven't a clue, but you just find yourself saying, why again with the anomalies? Why? I don't know. Remember how you were saying that people don't get killed in our elections? I think people who could be too inconvenient get killed all the time, or at least inconvenient. Let me put it this way: inconvenient people have a way of turning up conveniently dead.
Well, we didn't talk about Hillary Clinton a little bit.
I don't know enough there to say anything except I keep.
I don't know. They've never been proven, of course.
But I don't want to prove it. I mean, it would be good if you could, or if you could prove that it wasn't the case.
Yeah.
I
don't believe it.
I say, is there an actuary in the house? An actuaries decide what kind of risks there are and what's significant and what isn't.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
If 3 people get the flu in Santa Barbara, is that significant or is it not significant? Well, an actuarial can tell you by looking at the relative numbers.
Yeah.
So I look at it and I say, okay, the Clintons have this many contacts and this many of them are dead, and mostly not by natural causes. So I don't know the answer to this question. I want to say, hello, Society of Actuaries. Anybody care to weigh in and tell me whether that's significant or not?
Yeah.
Because I can't do it, but somebody can.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I say, it doesn't happen very often. Like was the one in San Francisco where the guy shot the sitting mayor. So it does happen. Who had the Twinkie defense.
That
kind of thing. And there's been, there has been instances of it, but not purposely. And a lot of times it's just jealousy and that.
Well, I think that was a case. Dan White did manage to get himself at least halfway deranged. I don't think too much of the Twinkie defense, which was outlawed right after it was successful.
Yeah.
But Dan White still went to jail for a while.
Yeah.
And here's, I think, a measure of what an unhappy camper the guy who murdered Moscone was. Right. He did the jail time. He got out, having done his jail time.
Yeah.
Killed himself.
Yeah, right.
So this is not a happy man.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, it does happen in that, but and a lot of times, like this thing with Biden, they had settled with his tax problems and his carrying a gun. He had been he was not supposed to have a weapon or something like that, and so on. And he went into court, and the judge threw it out. Now it's going to have to start all over again. But he got misdemeanors. He got time served or probation or something and so on. Whereas other people go to jail.
Well, I think one thing there was that it was represented to the judge that it would be a certain kind of settlement, and he looks at it, he says, I wasn't signing off on a sweetheart deal like this.
Yeah, right. Right. He was a Reagan appointee, however, in the court, as it turned out. Well, not Reagan, it was Trump appointee, I don't know, so on. But there again, they also say that judges are not, they're not, opposed to the law, and so on and so forth. Well, they're motivated by their own instincts and so on.
If nothing else, people tend to appoint judges that they think are more or less in agreement with them or sympathetic to their causes.
Yeah.
And this is one of those cases. George Carlin said this very well. You don't have to have them get together or have a phone call and agree to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
When everybody goes to the same parties, the same country clubs, knows each other's kids, then you all know what each other want. And you probably have similar goals. So that might not even be corruption. I'm just saying that you don't have to have a conspiracy for something a whole lot like a conspiracy to occur.
I want to change the subject completely. The news press, as everyone knows in town, is now defunct. It died, which is unfortunate and so on. I'll make some comment about it and see what you say. My comment is Wendy. What's his name?
Wendy McCaw.
Wendy McCaw has got some really bad press. Nick Welch went at her in Independent, a big thing that was not this most current issue today, but a week ago. How bad it was and how she did it. How she was using the newspaper as a progressive and so on. Well. Get real, Nick. It's been done all over. As a matter of fact, there was a man who actually owned 30 newspapers throughout the country, William Randolph Hearst. And guess what? he ran for president. And guess what? All of those newspapers endorsed him for president. He didn't win. He went to the Republican convention in 32, I guess it was, something like that. In fact, he was elected to Congress twice in his career and so on. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams in the 1800 election started newspapers to support them. In Jefferson's case and John Adams' case, the Federalists at least, and so on. Newspapers have always been used to promote, and of course we know now, of course, that CNN and Fox News, they promote their news to be like one thing I love to do is you have both channels on and you can see what they're talking about, and then you have a switch where it goes to the channel you just had, which would have been CNN. You go back and forth and so on, and it's like they're reporting on a whole different story. That they got their own facts and so on. Like what a guy once told me about the truth. I was at a party one time, and this philosophy graduate student was talking about the truth. He says the truth is like a bed, and you told a certain philosophy and so on, and you have a bunch of facts that back up that your theory. But unfortunately, the bed is not long enough. The other facts come out, and you can't put them on the bed. So what do? You forget about those facts. Like in the case of Hunter, and Hunter and that, and so on. I love that idea, the truth. The truth isn't the truth. It's the facts that back up that truth, and it can always be. It always will change. So that's my theory.
So about Wendy, now,
yeah,
Wendy had an editorial policy, and there were things that she wanted done, and her reporters thought that they ran the paper. Mm-hmm. They thought it was theirs, and when she told them what she wanted, I don't remember exactly how it went down, but basically a bunch of them they jumped ship. They didn't have to put up with this, and I guess they thought that she and her money worked for them instead of that they worked for her.
Right.
And in fact, a bunch of them, like Barney Brandingham, went right over to the Independent. Now, the Independent is
talk about biased.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't think of any time when they have they tear up any Republican that comes within their field of view.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, fine, it's okay to disagree with them, but it just, I can't look at them and say that they are anything like even-handed. So anyway, a lot of these folks who jumped ship, if they went over to the Independent, and I would say they were fundamentally independent, Santa Barbara Independent writers before they went, because I don't think it chafed them at all to do so.
Yeah, I think that like a lot of newspapers throughout the country have gone belly up, basically. And because of the internet and so on, there's some big newspapers in that, and it wasn't necessarily Wendy's goings on or whatever she did and so on that they objected to and so on. And they had a staff when it went under.
Remember that the news press was the first newspaper in the country to endorse Trump.
Yeah, that was. She was the first newspaper in the country to endorse him, and among very few, as it turned out.
Very few.
But there you go. That's right there. By endorsing a candidate, you have identified you're biased for a particular candidate in any news that's going to happen, and so on. But again, I might say that the better of two, the worst, lesser evil, might be the whole idea. Well, but keep in mind, what I really dislike about it is Wendy has a very conscious woman. She's a billionaireess, and she's been very in the community, especially with a organization she called the Wildlife Care Network. And I would have to say, I know of a place where they take all the pelicans that have been hurt, and in fact some of them had the disease or something like that, and so on. And she saved all of those animals. She's very conscious of animals and saving animals and so on and so forth. This was not mentioned at all maybe some reference to it in this Nick Welch's article. That gives me a lot of confidence in a woman that appreciates nature. But of course, like I say, what are you going to do? The paper is gone now. We'll see what happens. They may come back. I understand there's going to be Ehringer and a few of the people that were Schulte and all that were columnists for the paper want to bring it back. Probably on the internet, of course, but
it's better than nothing if you got some good features. I know that it must have been a cost-saving thing, but it hurt me when they cut out the comics and then. Yeah,
right. That's true. It's down to 8 pages.
Yeah, they cut out the comics. I'm sure it's an expense, but it was one of the things that I like about a paper. That and of course Sudoku, which I like to do.
Want ads. There's no such thing as want ads anymore. The LA Times is probably another one that's going to go under. Although that is backed by a billionaire person too. And believe me, I read the commentary on that, every article that they have, and I unfortunately buy it pay $3 for it now. Buy it to look at the opinion page and the articles and so on, and it's always biased. It's always biased.
So I've noticed that when you have somebody like a billionaire like Elon Musk buys Twitter, and a lot of folks just suddenly they're soiling their trousers with how awful this is, whereas a billionaire like Jeff Bezos, who's a huge liberal, buys the Washington Post. Hey.
Well, there again, that's a good. They're not just Bezos, but what's the guy's Facebook? Zuckerberg, and others and so on, who are very, very liberal, and they have a real weapon.
Yes,
they have a real weapon there about who's going to be show people and that.
Well, we've acquired a new verb in the last few years: shadow banning.
Yeah.
Where we don't tell you that we aren't. You think that you're tweeting. It's just that nobody's seeing your stuff.
Yeah.
And
and people, all they got to do is complain about it anonymously, and that he's saying this and saying that, and automatically they don't even read what they're supposed to be against. What the charge really is, they just accept this dialogue, and of course then it's cut off the air or made different. Or they tell them like they did with the laptop. They tell them this is what you're going to have to say, and that's what they did.
CIA and FBI actually had desks at.
Okay, we only got a few seconds left and so on.
Yeah. Anyway,
so,
go ahead.
Anyway, we go round and round with some of this stuff and so on, but that's interesting news, and always be new stuff. Always be new stuff. Anyway, thank you very much, and we'll see you again.
Kapla.
We're out.